right. But you see, start off with what the government's program is still on track for one reason. The highly regulated financial sector stakeholders cannot simply say they're not going to participate. So regardless of what happens, the banks will participate, for instance, right? They just have specific interests that they want aligned. But why are the banks also willing to do so? Because there are specific concessions that make sense in their case. For example, the government says it's going to put up a liquidity fund. Of course, it hasn't found the money, but at least it has a plan to do about $1 billion of support, which is extra and independent. Now ask yourself, what are the individual bondholders getting? So if the government is willing to make all these concessions, change regulatory rules. In fact, the funny thing I realized was that in Barbados and Jamaica, because of this fact, they tightened regulatory rules to prevent problems in the we are saying no, we actually have regulatory forbearance. All of these are pegs, right? These are ways in which you're trying to get the banks on board, because the banks are the biggest deal makers in this case. Now the individual bondholders are saying that why should we just simply accept something without similar concessions? I think the government should have made those concessions earlier. The problem right now is issues of trust. The individual bondholders just don't trust the government. So it might make sense that if the government creates a truly national platform and brings on board people of the highest esteem in the religious community, in the traditional community and the rest of it, as part and parcel. And that's what Jamaica and Barbados did, which is they tied the debt issue and its restructuring to overall national economic recovery. So in Barbados, they created the BERT, which was the National Recovery Program, and said, okay, now that we've come to you and taken your houses and your cars to go and sell, to go and solve our problem, you are now a stakeholder. So how we manage the economy going forward, you have strong views. So come and be part of a national monitoring committee going forward. So what I think people like Senyos and the rest are saying is that if they're going to give you a penny, then I'm going to be there to make sure either one, this doesn't happen again and bankrupt me, or two, we find ways to get our money back because the economy rebounds. But I don't trust that you do the thing you claim you are doing. So I'm saying that the individual bondholders will not act unless trust improves. And trust will not improve with simply come to a technical committee and give your views.
And from where you sit, how do you estimate time it will take for the government, even in this circumstance, to get the buy-in of stakeholders? As we know, the banks are afraid that there's an estimated impact of about 65 billion, that they are going to be affected. So this is no joke for them at all, and we're going to be speaking to them shortly. So what's your estimation? Will we meet the February deadlines we are looking at?
When it comes to the bulk of that industry, the bank, the security services, securities industry, they have very specific technical issues that must just be resolved. They don't want the interest rate the government is offering. They don't want to make the bonds easier to default next time. They don't want to create a situation where the valuation gap between the old bonds and new bonds just don't make sense and things like that. All of these are simply cost to liquidity relief. The government doing it for them means it gets less money. Simple. It should just go ahead and come to some settlement, which will lead to it losing some liquidity relief. If it does that, it will get the bulk of those people. Then when it comes to those that are asking for total exemption, it's a much harder challenge. My view would be that you do what you can to get the relief you can. First, in order to meet the IMF situation, it only will work if you convince the IMF that you will do the fiscal consolidation that will pay for the liquidity relief you've given to the industry and the exemptions that you've granted in the interim.
Right.
So I think that's up to the government now to take that decision.
Okay.